case, and this really is a case. Sarah Palin suing the New York Times for defamation. She claims a recent editorial falsely portrayed her as responsible for inciting the 2011 shooting of Gabby Giffords. Judge Napolitano is here. Does Sarah Palin have a case?
You know, I normally would say no because she's a public figure, and the very high bar for a public figure to prevail is that she must show that the New York Times was reckless in its concern for the truth or was aware of a falsehood and published it anyway. She has a case, because she actually has emails from the New York Times in which they recognize that some of the things that they said about her were false, but yet they were obliquely repeated anyway.
So they knowingly repeated a falsehood?
Yes and no. She can make that argument to the court. She will, what we say, survive a motion, meaning if they don't settle this case, she's going to get to a jury. This goes back to when Sarah Palin had a PAC. And identified certain congressional Democrats as targets of the PAC. And they improperly and crudely put a bullseye over the congressional district. One of those congressional districts was Gabby Giffords, who, of course, was nearly murdered by this crazy person who killed a bunch of others, including a child and a federal judge. At the time, the New York Times blamed Sarah Palin for inciting the violence that resulted in Gabby Giffords' attack by using the crosshair logo. They reiterated that just 2 weeks ago. That is the basis.
That's the basis
for the lawsuit. And they reiterated it after a lot of coming and going, hemming and hawing. Is it right or isn't it right? So she's got a case.
I want your comment on this. I'm going to deliver later on this morning an editorial which says once the government gives a benefit, it's virtually impossible to take it away. And we're seeing that now with health care reform. And you say?
I fully agree with you. Barack Obama has succeeded in establishing as a basic premise the obligation of the federal government to provide for health care insurance or coverage. That was never an assumed obligation by the federal government before he was president. Now, very few exceptions, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Tom Massey, Justin Amash, very, very few reject that premise. Even staunch conservative Republicans are afraid to confront the electorate without some Christmas tree ornament to give them.
But if you did confront the electorate and say, we're taking this away, you wouldn't have the votes.
You'd be voted out of office.
And if you wouldn't have the votes, you have no agreement, you cannot reform Obamacare, in come the Democrats and give you Obamacare on steroids.
I reluctantly, with most reluctance, agree with you.
It's like pulling teeth with you.
Yes.
All right, Judge, the dentist visit is over.
Yeah, thank you. What about that Novocaine wearing off?
Yeah. All right, Judge, thanks very much indeed.